Religion Zero, number 39. How's everyone doing? Doing good? Awesome. Well, Religion Zero, number 39.
In the can?
Huh?
In the can, all done.
Oh, yeah. I hope you all had a good episode. Any final thoughts? Speaking of final thoughts, let's do the opposite of that. Let's do openings. Brooke, how has your week been?
My week has been pretty slow. We just had the review out here in Wales. Am I coming through okay? I actually didn't do much of a sound check before.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So yeah, we just had the recent review out here in Wales, and they have extended the lockdown for another 3 weeks. So we're going into March definitely before the next review. Nothing has really changed. I think apart from outdoor exercise, instead of I think 2 households or 2 people meeting, you can have up to 4. Yay! Yes, yeah, fantastic. I don't even think I have 4 friends in the entire neighborhood. But apart from that, a lot of people are kind of fed up and frustrated with the entire scenario. So I had a couple people in my house last night, hence the disaster that you see in the background, the wine bottles and other such things. So I'm coming off a little bit of a bender. Well, not really me, but the other people, they definitely had a bender. But yeah,
you got a bender through osmosis. Right?
Yeah. I was kind of the overseer of the anarchy and such. So yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit fuzzy today, but we could do all things by the Christ that strengthens us, right? So let's see how the day goes. Yeah. How about you, man? How you doing?
Yeah, good. I was gonna say, I think the Backstreet Boys reunion tour isn't that like in global decline?
It is.
But yet we lock down still.
Well, I mean, not to get into it too much, but they've changed the PCR test cycling. So they were running the test at 40 RPMs or whatever the case is, which is the most unreliable way to get a positive result. Anything that's found at that level is basically, it's no distinguishable from background noise. So ironically, when Biden gets elected, the World Health Organization says, oh, you should drop that down to 20. And now we see everything is declined. I don't know if they're related, but we'll see what's going on with the coof.
Yeah. Oh, Backstreet Boys reunion tour. You will never stop. Amos, how are you doing?
Doing good. Woke up a little bit ago, as usual. Not too much going on. I know we are out of the cold with Minnesota. I know the entire country's kind of in our deep freeze, and we're finally out of it, mostly. Here I am walking around outside in shorts when it's just barely above 0.
Amen. Amen. You get the Colorado in you. That was the Colorado stereotype. As long as there's not a negative in front of the number, you can still wear shorts and flip-flops.
Is that barbecue weather?
Yeah, that barbecue? Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You see a lot of dads
grilling
in gym shorts.
0.
Yeah. In Colorado, you see a lot of dads in gym shorts, like pushing off 5 inches of snow from the grill in the afternoons. That's a pretty normal thing in Colorado. I love that. That was good. That was good times.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. For me, boy, I had a doozy of last night. I decided to try a new hot wing place. And that turns, I ended up playing, what's that game called? Press Your Luck all night.
Is that what you call it? Or like worshiping at the porcelain throne by chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. There's that old game show called Press Your Luck where it had a bunch of random lights and you had to push a button to stop it, and you either got a prize or a whammy. And if you got too many whammies, you got kicked out. So I was playing Press My Luck all night in the middle of the night. It made it very hard to sleep. So, yeah, I almost got a whammy a couple times and had to find a new place to sleep. But thankfully, I beat the timer by a couple seconds. So,
congratulations!
Yeah, I was definitely pressing my luck all night. But I'm alive and awake, so that's all good. I didn't die, and I didn't have to go find a new bed. So, winner. Who's the real winner here? All right. So on to today's thing. Is the Garden of Eden relevant? So last week we talked about creation, evolution, creation stories in general. And I was talking about I wanted to go way more deeper dive into the Garden of Eden actual narrative and see if that's actually relevant to us, right? I think most people's, or at least Christian or religious people's relationship is to, yeah, that's where bad stuff happened, right? There's not, they feel like there's not a lot reading into it, but I mean, I feel like there's a lot there and there's a lot of connotations and there's a lot of interpretations of what actually happened in the Garden of Eden. Why that even existed in the first place. So I kind of want to go through those. Do we want to start off just giving our personal hot takes of what we think is relevant or what we think happened or anything like that? Brooke, how do you feel about the Garden of Eden? Is it relevant?
I mean, yeah, we discussed this a little bit in the previous episodes. I don't necessarily believe it's a literal story. I think there's definitely a metaphorical slant to it, but it is trying to convey some spiritual truths. There are a lot of layers to it. I kind of focus in on the big story, which involves the fall, how they responded with the fig leaves. Which, you know, in my understanding, like the fig leaves is man's attempt to deal with the separation between himself and God. And when we read the story, the reason that they hid in the bushes, they hid in whatever it was, is because they were afraid and they were ashamed because they realized they were naked. And that little point about shame is something that a lot of people miss in the overall narrative. The reason we run from God is because we were ashamed of what we've done. So there's guilt, there's shame, and many times, especially in modern parlance, we think there's also condemnation. We believe we have to be punished for what we think we have done. So in those three things, we can see all aspects of it kind of, you know, playing out in the garden and so forth. And we will, we contrast that with the ministry of Christ, which also, you know, when he came out of the tomb, he also came out in a garden, symbolizing the recreation, the reset of the creation narrative. And the cross, of course, is the answer to all three of the guilt, the shame, and the condemnation. The guilt, all of our sins have been forgiven. The shame, he has, you know, created us into a new creation. We're the one new man. You know, we're growing into the perfection that he's called us to be. As we look upon him, we become more like him. There's nothing wrong with us. But yeah, just like a baby is born 100% human, it's not going to drive a car on day one, right? There is growth. There is progression. And for that, there's grace and forgiveness where we don't live up to our full potential. And ultimately condemnation, you know, he was condemned that we can never be condemned. So for me, I take the big view that the two stories kind of have to go hand in hand. So in today's parlance, yeah, there's no reason to run from God, which is why Paul would write, you know, we can come boldly to the throne of grace, knowing that we're fully accepted, fully adopted. There's nothing wrong with us, fully forgiven. And by there, we could receive growth and grace. That's the big story. There's a lot of little nuance. I know you were kind of touching on that, but I figure we'll get into that as we go forward. Yeah. But I would say that's the big pull away for me from the Garden of Eden story.
So what you're trying to tell me is I'm adopted? Is that what you're saying?
A what?
Did you just say I'm adopted?
Yeah. Well, humanity has a father. Basically, we're not orphans. He hasn't left us orphans, right? We are part of the family of God. Yeah, that's part of the message.
Yeah, God is my holy father. I never knew my real father.
Yeah. Good on you, man.
All right, Amos, what do you think the big hit point of Garden of Eden is, if it's relevant?
Shit. I mean, personally, like when it comes to the different stories, I actually really haven't looked too much into the Garden of Eden. That much.
You're that guy, which is like 90% of America.
Yeah. I mean, hearing kind of what Brooks said, that honestly makes the most sense. Narratively, it's setting up kind of the stage for like the fall of man, which then is leading for later on in the Bible, leading to the redemption of man. Like whatever Adam did, Jesus had to then, of course, do a greater work to undo. And sort of above and beyond undoing it, not just undoing the fall of man, but also like redeeming and sort of. For some reason, my brain, I'm thinking, yeah. For some reason, I'm thinking in my head, not only were we sort of brought back to life, but also like, Jesus kind of turned us into, hate saying this, but it's almost like Super Saiyans.
What level though?
Sons of God.
Yeah. Like, not only did we sort of get redeemed from like, the fall to how God intended us to be, but also even beyond that. Now we're not only in the proper standing that we were before, but also an even greater standing. Now we're, children of God.
We're like
sons
double
and daughters.
standing. That's twice as much as regular standing.
Instead of understanding, we're like overstanding.
Yeah. I really overstanded my welcome here. I really.
Not only did we get like a qualifying credit score, we got an even better credit score.
Yeah, we're in the thousands, and that's not even possible.
1,000 credit score.
MLG
it only goes up to 700 out here, so that would be a miracle.
But that's the thing, is like it's not only Genesis. Well, the story of the Garden of Eden is basically setting up the stage. More narratively in that sense, because I know last week we talked about like if we believe in any literal sense of the Garden of Eden story, but it's more just setting up the stage.
Okay. So. Yeah. I think those are both pretty good takes, but I'm also going to have to say you're all wrong. It's about aliens. All right. Aliens came. The Garden of Fruit was aliens. Fifth dimensional fruit trees that were giving us life and knowledge.
This is the Anunnaki, right? This is like, Nibiru's story,
Oh, yeah. And they all hang out in, what is it? Like the have you ever heard about the dark, like pentagon, hexagon of Jupiter or Saturn or something like that? That's where all evil comes from.
Really?
No, a lot of people believe that. And it's part of that whole
Jupiter actually has a hexagonal formation on its north pole.
Yeah, and they say that's where all evil comes from, and they connect it to all of the like the pedophile baby killer theory somehow. But yeah, that's all in there if you get deep dive too far into all of that crazy stuff. But yeah, it all comes from Saturn. Saturn is the actual pit to hell where all evil comes from, which is interesting.
Fascinating. You got to send me a link on that. Yeah, aliens.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure half of BitChute talks about it. So
I'll check it out. Yeah, I am on BitChute.
BitChute loves their hexagonal alien theories. But yeah, I would say the thing that I care about the most, and we talked about it before off screen, I think, is the two trees, because I find that really interesting. We have the tree of life and the knowledge of good and evil. Usually, if I just tell you what is life good, is knowledge of good and evil, most people would say yeah. So like, how is there a good guy, bad guy narrative into two trees that sound relatively harmless, if that makes sense? Yeah, usually when you hear these kind of stories, you think, oh, that's the good guy tree and that's the bad guy tree. But why is the bad guy tree called knowledge of good and evil? Most people would think that's a good thing, right? So I like deep diving into that, and I found lots and lots of interpretations, and I wrote down about 4 or 5, right?
Sweet.
And we can go through those, give our hot takes on it, see if any of them are relevant to us, if they're dumb takes, if they're good takes, if they're just weird. In general, we'll see.
Yeah.
So the first one, I would call this one the basic bitch one. This is the one that wears Uggs and drinks pumpkin spice lattes, right? It's that the tree of knowledge is bad because it's all about God testing us, and will you obey or rebel? And I think that is the most common interpretation I found Googling this. This is the basic one, right? So this is the most default thing: is the tree of life is good, the tree of knowledge is bad, and God wants us to do good things, and He says, "Don't eat that bad thing." And oh no, we ate the bad thing, right? Have you guys heard that interpretation before? That basic assumption.
I think I mean I've heard the idea that
Mhm.
the tree was in and of itself bad, and again I think we've kind of touched on this before. And it's like it can't really be bad because God does say in the garden that look, now man has become like us, as he now has the knowledge of good and evil. He's become like us. So unless that makes God evil, the act the knowledge that is received in the tree is not necessarily evil. Now the disobedience, maybe that's the angle that they're taking it on, and they're saying that God is kind of testing them. James 1:13 kind of puts that to an end, right? If any man is tempted, let no man say that he's tempted of God, because God does not tempt by evil, nor does he tempt anybody. So nobody's being tested of God, right? God doesn't need to test you. He kind of knows where you're at, right? He may put you in something to show you where you're at, but nobody's tested of God. God knows the answers, right? So, I would say that's a very Gnostic kind of thinking that the actual thing was evil. It was a setup. God did it intentionally. He would not have put us in that position. If Jesus Christ is the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world, he knew we were going to screw this up. So yeah, the foreknowledge kind of, and God can't do anything evil out of like direct intent sort of thing. So it would be against his nature. So yeah, I'd question that one. It's fun, but I don't think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, to me, it's like the easy answer. Like, okay, whatever. Here's an answer. Let's move on. Kind of.
Yeah,
thing, right?
It's pretty cool though. I like.
He's just testing you. Move on. Don't rebel. That's bad.
Yeah.
Have you heard that take before, Amos? Of the knowledge of tree and evil is just bad, and it's just there to test us.
Yeah, it's
tree bad.
Tree bad.
Yeah, that take doesn't really make too much sense because. I mean, as much as like I'm not a big fan of like, I personally am not a big fan of apples by themselves.
Like, well, first of all, it's not even an apple, right?
Exactly, but I'm saying it's like
their terms of service is garbage. So
yeah, their whole ecosystem is way too expensive. Way overpriced.
Yeah, but here they are. They're depicting the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil as apples, and it's like, and this is the bad fruit. Like, I've never really understood like the entire way that we depict the fruit from this tree. How it's always like, Adam and Eve just innocently eating an apple. Like, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, apparently not in this case, because we kind of all died through that, at least through, how the Bible describes it. But
the apple a day kept the good doctor away, right?
yeah.
Did you get a night nurse?
We got kicked out of the office. Yeah. Wouldn't even let me reschedule.
But yeah, it's always been kind of depicted as like bad, and there's not really even much like further exposition really on any of that. Like, people just kind of go, oh, like, yeah, we ate that fruit we weren't supposed to, so it's a bad fruit. No one talks about the tree of life. No one talks about like what is this all supposed to put? Huh?
The tree of life apparently had fruit too. So
yeah,
is there like fruits unto life and fruits unto death? Like, somebody's saying papaya is like obviously evil. So
yeah, or durian.
Or durian.
and now the tree of life is lost in the Garden of Eden. We're never gonna have access to it or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we can go into that later, but yeah, there's a lot of people, especially like the Bethel IHOP charismatic side. They think, Garden of Eden is on a mountain and we'll get access to it when heaven comes and the revelation begins and yada, yada. So they kind of have this whole weird eschatology about the Garden of Eden. That heaven is just going back to that essentially, and it's locked away on a mountain until then. It's weird and dumb, but
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this take's pretty bad as well. It's first of all, assuming the tree is bad in itself, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I think is like a cop out. I think it's the easy answer you just throw away so your kids would stop asking you why, kind of thing. So yeah, it's very basic for that reason. So I've got a couple more. I think we're going to go in escalation of how deep I think it is that we could discuss it. So that's the dumb one. Um, there's one that we talked about a bit last week when it was on Amos's channel, and we talked about the tree of knowledge is the law. And I think that one's very interesting. I think it has some merit, but it's essentially that the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the Tower of Babel and the Mosaic Law are all just escalations of essentially the same thing, where they all involve something about don't do that. It's trying to be like God. It becomes a curse. It promises death. It makes people more confused than that is helpful. And all of those all kind of have similar analogies all throughout each other. And so they just say the tree of knowledge was like the first law that we broke. That's God's law. But the point of the law is to bring us to repentance and regeneration and salvation and all of those kinds of things. So what do you guys think about that take? Do you see any analogies between the law and the tree?
Yes.
Sweet. Go with it, Amos. Go with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at kind of like I guess it's setting the stage, and you look at how we're supposed to sort of have a relationship with God. What is our relationship with God, with sin, with grace, stuff like that? You kind of find out that, like, really, the law sort of bringing in that sort of sin consciousness, or being conscious of all the sins you're committing, that wasn't God's intention. Like, that's kind of like the knowledge of good and evil that basically drew a line through it, through good and evil, through our just the distinguishing between good and evil, whereas God didn't really intend for us. Like, when he put us on the earth, we were supposed to just sort of, Adam and Eve were just going to live life, enjoying of the garden and not having a problem with really anything. Just go through the garden, naming animals, enjoying the fruits, having sex, being fruitful, and multiplying. Like, that was what Adam and Eve was really just going to be doing. They weren't going to be thinking about all the stuff sort of we think about when it comes to good and evil, pleasing God, not pleasing God, all these self-conscious, sin-conscious sort of ideas. So when they basically took part in the fruit, it drew that line in their mind to basically now start looking at everything as good versus evil, which, fine, now but now you're conscious of that, and knowing, like, how we, of course, now think about good and evil. We're always sort of like, a lot of our narratives, a lot of our stories play out as good versus evil, which is, again, great. But it's that line is where we kind of like start having not only the evil in the world, but also sort of the the hypocrisy, the sort of holier than thou ideas. Now you have the law. The law was basically, well, you're holier than someone because you either committed fewer sins, or you got forgiveness more often, through more sacrifices, all this stuff, all because at one point, at least in the narrative of the Garden of Eden, we got the knowledge. Now we know good and evil, not just we just lived in the bliss of being in the presence of God, being in the Garden of Eden. Now it's,
yep,
we see ourselves as more than God. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So this is where I got it from. So the video is titled "Law Equals Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil," and he had this, what do you call it? Chart, picture, graph thing, and it goes through all of the different verses involved in it. And so they're talking about the tree and the law. Both talk about being blind and naked. Their eyes are open. There's some form of death, and so that's just interesting. You guys can screenshot that, or I can post the link of the video in the chat. You can look at that, and it's kind of interesting on how all of them kind of relate, and they have a lot of scripture behind that, which is why I think this one's interesting, because there's a lot of good analogies to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's the official, what God was intending thing, Who knows? Maybe not. But I think it is interesting pointing out how many times they are used in the same context or using the same verbiage for both the law and the knowledge of good and evil. Because, and you were kind of saying this just now, Amos, like the law in itself and the knowledge of good and evil is everything turns into, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? What's the good guy? What's the bad guy in this story?
Yeah.
And
grace intended for that to not be the case.
Mm-hmm.
We were just supposed to go through life.
Good.
Everything was good. Like, yeah, we, if Adam and Eve never partook of the fruit and they just I would say they probably wouldn't have had arguments. It would have been probably the perfect relationship that they had with each other.
I don't know. Women though.
Or even if they did. Well, but I mean, if this is controversial, what if just in terms of the narrative, like what's playing out?
Mm-hmm.
What if it was the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil that created both male and female nature?
Yeah,
as
possibly.
We see it. Maybe before that, there was male and female nature, but it wasn't they weren't as in conflict with each other.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the curses of sin. The woman and the man got different curses, right?
Yeah,
because of the original sin. So
I mean, it can't be just limited to what was exactly described. There could be other ramifications of how, what God laid out is, okay, now you have to do this. Like, now men have to work to produce from the ground. Now women have to experience pain during childbirth. Like, there's all this stuff. How that plays out, at least how that can be, what can come from that, if those are the root issues that basically come about because of the fall. It could be a bunch of other things. So for all we know, if they ever had any even disagreement or some sort of, if you want to say, conflict, it wouldn't have necessarily been bad because they would have been in such bliss of the good. It would have just not been an issue.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out, though, that being a boss babe is part of the curses of sin. So all you ladies out there striving to be the breadwinner, you're just supporting a curse. I'm just letting you know.
But that's the other thing, too. Maybe because, prior to the fall, men weren't even really, we weren't even seen as, the breadwinner when, the Garden of Eden and the land was just providing for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because I think it said you still had to work, but now it's going to be painful and excruciating, and you're only going to get it by the sweat of your brow, right? So in that sense, we were still kind of hunter-gatherer, and we had to do some stuff, but it was normal, easy stuff instead of having to physically toil a field or go fight a lion, right? Now
probably,
food was just there. You just go out and grab it, kind of thing. Yeah.
And with the dominion that Adam had over the earth, the animals probably just came up to him, and he would just take care of it there. He didn't have to go hunt. There was no labor in that. The animals were just oh, okay, well, he's his dominion, so I'm just gonna go over to him. Here, Bambi.
I mean, that's
all right.
That's not quite how it went down because humans didn't actually start eating animals until after the flood. So the food was every fruit and everything that gives seed in the ground in the garden was basically food.
Are you saying we were vegan before the
fall? Yeah, we were vegan
whoa.
Fruitarian.
They might still have milk. You don't know.
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, the first account of men being allowed to eat animals came after in the narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we don't know. This is not the saying.
The soy levels.
Yeah. Well, the first animal killed was killed by God. So
correct.
It wasn't done by humans, and that's what we clothed ourselves with was the animal that first
skin
that God killed. Skin. Yeah. So correct. That's a fun one.
Well, maybe just to give my take on that whole thing. I agree. I don't think the problem with the diagram that you put up was the whole thing about being naked. We forget, there's a van passing. We forget that God created them naked. right? So they're trying to tie the symbolism of being naked in the garden with the law, and the contrast of the law, making a person aware of their sins and exposing themselves. But we forget that they were kind of in the garden beforehand as naked, and their eyes were open and they realized it, but it was never an issue. I don't think the knowledge of good and evil is not the law. The knowledge in good and evil is the conscience. It is the thing that tells us good and bad, that leads to the law, right? So if our friend of the show Terrence were here and he was arguing his morality question, this is the common ancestor of where we get the root of morality. It is the foundation of every religion. It is the foundation of every moral statute. This is where we get it from. So the law came out of the knowledge of good and evil in the treaty covenant with God and Israel. But in and of itself, it's not a bad thing, right? Again, God has the same knowledge of good and evil. So this is the contrast. Everybody's trying to say like, yeah, it's a bad thing. We do understand that there is a higher law, that the two coexist. You can have the knowledge of good and evil, but still live by the tree of life, which is what God is doing. Obviously, he is above all of this stuff. So it doesn't completely negate that. But you're completely right. People can get caught up in self-righteousness, which is probably, it's the worst thing, because you don't really believe that you need the work of Christ by continuously trying to do good and not do bad, which is basically every religion on the face of the earth, right? If I just do enough good, I the scales of justice, or however you want to do it. And that is the trap. That is the trap that men fall into. That is the warning of the tree of good and evil. So when Adam and Eve took of the fruit, they tried their first religion, which was to cover themselves in fig leaves, right? They were the Figarians, right? They put on the fig leaves and their little grass skirts and whatever to try and cover their nakedness. Man's attempt to solve the issue of sin, and that is the trap that the tree led us into. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Good fun.
Good times.
Oh, yeah. All right. I think we solved it. Have a good one, everyone. All right. So this next one is interesting. So we could either go which route. So these are pretty similar, but let's go with the black-pilled one first. And this comes from our favorite lobster philosopher, Jelly B. Peanutson.
Is saying his name going to get us pulled off YouTube? Is that how bad the censorship has gotten now?
Nowadays, probably.
Yeah, probably.
He had his hot take about it, and I was watching some of his stuff, and his idea of the knowledge of good and evil, and it kind of goes into what we were just talking about before. Before knowledge of good and evil, everything was just good, right? We didn't really even know about evil, right?
Except there was one thing in the garden that was not good.
And that was solitude, right?
Yes, that man was alone.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing that was not good. But yes, fair point. So all these people who saying all I need is God, you're full of shit. No, that's obviously not
that was not good. Yeah.
That was actually not good. If you're gonna run off into the wilderness and live by yourself in a cabin and get close to God, that's not how it works.
And if you're going to do that, please do not mail bombs. It does not go well. They're going to be chasing you for like 25 years.
I'm just thinking, like, the only thing. No, actually, I lost my train of thought. Damn it.
It's all right.
Yeah, sorry. Finish your point, Carl.
But yeah, Jelly B. Peanutson. That's going to be his name.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Lobsters had no hierarchy before the fall.
Yeah. They were all equally confident. Yeah. Held themselves up straight and cleaned their rooms.
Were they all right-wing Yahtzees as well, or?
Just maybe.
Yahtzees.
I don't know what we can say anymore. Fuck you.
Oh, yeah. So his thing, he cared a lot about the... So there's like the white pill side and black pill side of it, but there are similar things, and they talk about what's been introduced once you introduce that. So Peterson talked about the black pillar side, which said when you know the knowledge of good and evil instead of just the knowledge of good, the first thing that pointed out to him, and we just talked about it a little bit, but he went deep dived into it, is that once you ate from the fruit, you immediately became vulnerable, right? And vulnerability is a huge aspect of that. They felt naked and ashamed. We talked about that. And then they tried to clothe themselves and hide from God while God was walking around. They're like, where are you guys? And they're like, oh, it was like the worst game of hide and seek ever with an omnipotent being.
Omnipresent.
Yeah. You usually lose those, I've heard. But he talked about the idea of vulnerability and vulnerability's connection to evil, because those are the two things that were introduced. And he said there wasn't suffering before, there wasn't evil before, there was only good, or the absence of good, which is interesting because of the solitude thing we were talking about. Because something not good isn't necessarily evil, right?
Correct.
Like cancer. Cancer isn't really evil. It's just something that happens.
Just is, yeah.
Yeah. And so I would put solitude more than that, not because otherwise God created evil, and then you got this whole little juxtaposition problem you got. But he talks about when you have knowledge of good and evil and vulnerability come in, and he talks about how those interrelate, because not only do you know your own vulnerabilities and your insecurities, you now know other people's vulnerabilities, and that's where evil comes from, right? The way we learn to torture or murder or mess with other people and do evil things is based on us attacking others' vulnerabilities. But in the Garden of Eden, when we were all naked and fat and happy, there was no vulnerabilities. Everybody was just chill, right? And so he interrelates how vulnerability and evil go together, and I thought that was really interesting. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys see that at all?
Well, I mean, you look at people. I was honestly just thinking to myself when you said you see the vulnerabilities in others, and you're talking about like murder and stuff. I just thought,
and snuggle struggles.
I think I heard on the Tim Pool's podcast, unrequested insemination. That was the word they used.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, I heard that. That's good.
They're trying to we
got to use coded language. I mean, Tim Pool is on the edge, man. He's gonna be gone any day now.
But I'm looking at this, and let's say you got two guys pre-fall. We're just chatting with each other, so they're looking at each other, naked. I mean, we
Cain and Abel
is naked. Let's say Cain and Abel, there was no fall, and there was Cain and Abel. Well, they're looking at each other, and they're just. They're giving offerings to God because they love God. So they're doing what they're doing, and they're both totally fine. And they're looking at each other so here's, Cain is looking at Abel, and he see maybe it's a hard day's work, and he sees sort of, what is it? Maybe he just sees his artery here, pulsating. Now, if we had the knowledge of good and evil, it'd probably be like, I could make him bleed out. Or I could attack him. Those thoughts can come up. We've had. I mean, no one is going to deny. From day-to-day interactions we just have angry thoughts. Where your boss is doing whatever. People are annoying you, and you're like, oh, I could just end this. I could just end this guy. Whatever. We have those thoughts. We don't act on it because we have self-control. Well, now, just imagine. But imagine sort of the narrative that is being set up pre-fall. They're just sitting there looking at each other as, God created this brother for me through my parents. And that's that. He's looks good. He looks good. My parents look fine. They're sort of just in the enjoyment in the presence of God. They're enjoying God's creation.
This is slowly turning into a homoerotic novel, I can tell.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying? How they view the world was just there was no thought of trying to exploit, trying to hurt, or doing anything. It was just the bliss of everything's good.
Yeah.
They would look at the tree producing fruit and go, oh, that's cool. They thank the tree. They thank God that they have the fruit. Now we look at a tree and we're like, I could sell that. I could cut this tree down to make wood. I could do all these things. I could probably, and then there was also like working to make the land produce fruit.
Mm-hmm.
We probably didn't have to really plant anything if it weren't for the fall. We probably understand, if I eat an apple has seeds, I can plant a tree and there's just more trees. But I wouldn't think
it'll probably grow.
Yeah, and it'll just grow. Like, I didn't think of tilling the land to mass produce crops. I didn't think of a lot of things that we just do now. A lot of these thoughts and ideas, both in like, and it's like, it's not that it's like, is it capitalism or communism? It's just, they didn't even think of that. It was just the land would respond to the dominion of man and just produce fruit. And then they would consume that, and that's it. There was no consideration of anything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because that goes right into his thing. So I was going to talk about the white bill half of that, and
well, do you want me to comment before you get to the?
Oh yeah, go ahead, go.
No, I think it's an interesting take. And yes, vulnerability and all of these things do come with the knowledge of good and evil, and the possibility for exploitation. The idea that hierarchy, I can be better than somebody else, and all of these different types of things. I think somebody was saying in the chat about man's burden of performance and hypergamy and all this was part of the curse, and maybe to some degree those things weren't necessarily present before. Our job was to expand the Garden of Eden. Our job was to eat fruit, spit it out, it'll grow, and we'll cover the entire earth with this luscious garden. And we tend the garden, like, some clipping some leaves and stuff. I mean, we had work. It just wasn't hard work, right? Ironically, Christ came, and one of the first acts that was performed upon him was the pressing of the crown of thorns on his head, releasing the blood from his brow. And that's the language that's used to break that exact curse, to break the curse of by the sweat of your brow you shall earn bread. So that whole idea of working, I was seeing it actually. People do break back labor anymore to make money and these kinds of things. We're seeing a kind of shift away from that. But yeah, getting back to the vulnerability and the exposure of the weakness of humanity, I guess is what he's really talking about. Is Amos is describing before the fall, we just saw ourselves as God's creations, but somewhere in partaking of the fruit, we saw a need. We saw the desire for more, and I think that is what Peterson is probably alluding to. I've never heard that take before. It's actually very interesting. So if you could send me the video or the link of where you found that, I'd love to hear his full lecture on that one.
Yeah. There's like a 4-minute snippet of it cut out, but I'm sure you can find the full lecture as well.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, so those are pretty interesting, and he does a ton of Bible commentary from his own unique take about how much he hates, Marxism and stuff. But
yeah.
All right. So the white-pilled flip side of this is ironic because it comes from our good old Christian Epstein, Ravi Zacharias, accused allegedly.
We never touched on the Ravi Zacharias stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to. Maybe after we finish this
topic. I don't want to touch anything he touched. I don't know if he washed his hands or what, but his thing, and this one is like a mix of that mixed with the first one we talked about, and he kind of just gives a more detailed explanation of the thing, and it comes into, instead of obedience versus rebellion, it goes into talking about that love can only exist with choices, which is extremely ironic given his circumstance.
Interesting.
So I felt like I needed to put that in there just for the irony of it. But
trigger warning.
Yeah. So he didn't say necessarily the tree of knowledge of good and evil is bad, or the tree of life is good kind of thing. He still put them on equal parameters, but the fact that God gave them a choice is what lets love flow. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah.
Position.
And people were talking about in chat earlier, they're talking about automatons and robots, right? Are we robots of God and things like that? And the way we are not robots or God is that you have to give a free will choice. in order to love. Otherwise, we're robots or
Correct.
slaves. So that's his hot take, and it's a little mixed of Jordan Peterson's mixed with the basic one. So I'm sure you guys have probably heard that one before, at least the idea that love can only exist from choices. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I probably heard that because I used to listen to Ravi Zacharias when I was younger. Him and what's the other guy? William Lane Craig were kind of very big influences when I was into the apologetics and stuff.
William Lane Craig is cosmic nihilism, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they have some good talks. I think everybody should do some apologetics so that you just don't, fall into some weird stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's the phase. It's kind of like the emo phase, or
you gotta
kids go through.
You gotta go through
an apologist phase, and then you realize I don't.
It doesn't really benefit anybody. It's just for your own good, kind of the arguments that you use and stuff. So I mean, what happened with Ravi? I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but he's right. And in fact, my work on the article that I did, and I think the video as well on the purpose of creation has a lot to do with that. In the sense that, I mean, if in the beginning, God, the Holy Spirit, and the Son were all there, and they decided to have a family. They decided to have kids. And they could have left us as spiritual beings. They could have just, brought us forth out of their spirit essence, and we could have just stayed in the by and by, the eternity, and stayed there. But for some reason, they created a realm of time where things can change and decay and transform and all these other things. So you've got to ask yourself, what's the purpose of that? And I think, as I explained it, is that there are aspects to God's character that cannot be expressed in eternity. Right. So God is a healer, and he can never show that he's a healer if nobody gets sick. Right. If everything's perfect in the sweet by and by. Right. He's a comforter. He can't show he's a comforter in the sweet by and by when there's no suffering. Right. So the whole creation aspect of it is actually a revelation, part of the revelation of who he is, that we get the fullness of that experience, both from this life and when we finally meet him in the bliss and the fullness of his essence. So you need both. And in order for that to happen, it requires choice and decay. Now, the only caveat I would have for that, Ravi was very big, and a lot of Christians are very big on how much we need to love God, and love God, and God wants us to love him. And no, absolutely not. God does not necessarily really care about how much we love him. In fact, we saw this illustrated in the Bible between the difference between Peter and John. Mm-hmm. Peter was always boasting about how much he loved God. Like, I will never forsake you, Lord. I'll be the last man standing. And, what do we know happened? Peter just denied Christ 3 times at the cross. When you contrast that with John, that John himself writes and says that he was the disciple whom Jesus loved, right? So he was the object of the love. John was the only one who stayed at the cross. He was the one who, was willing. He didn't give a shit what people said. Mm-hmm. So yes, loving God, great. It's fantastic. What's really important is you accepting God's love for you. Because what does love want? Love wants somebody to love. It's an otherness. It's not looking for anything in return. God doesn't need your love. God is complete in himself. In fact, the Trinity was fine before we were created. He doesn't need us. But that's a little bit why I disagree with Ravi in terms of stressing the love aspect. I believe he's right in terms of the choice, but they tend to hold up this idea that if we just love God, then we'll solve sin and we'll solve all these other things, completely ignoring the idea of living from the Christ in you. So that would be my take on Ravi's spin.
Yeah, I would say when it comes into the "are we supposed to love God or does God love us" thing, I think it's interesting because this is often a like atheist try hard rebuttal that it's like, why do you believe in something that needs your adoration all the time? It's like, well, he actually does it, right?
He doesn't.
Yeah, but it's how it's that weird little, atheist perspective that they have to wear that, oh, you worship something that needs love and affirmation all the time or he gets mad. I think actually it's not even close, but cool beans, man.
Exactly. Yeah. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need anything. Mm-hmm. And this just quickly, another phrase that absolutely pisses me off is this charismatic phrase like none of me and all of him. This kind of bullshit. Yeah. Right. I must decrease that he might increase, which was John the Baptist said that about Christ. meaning that the time of the old covenant is coming to an end. Christ is going.
Yeah, he's talking about ministries. Yeah,
he's talking about ministry. But this idea that none of me and all of him, he had that. He had all of him and none of you, and he didn't like it. That's why he created you, right?
Yeah.
Like, stop this shit. It is all of you and all of him in union. For fuck's sake.
Get it together, America.
Get it together, man.
Yeah.
Go on,
All right.
Amos. Give us your thoughts.
Hot
What do you
take.
think of Ravi?
Does love need a choice, or can you force it? As
Does love need
some
a
Indian
choice?
professors do. Allegedly.
Saying, so does love need a choice?
Yeah. That was his big thing with the tree, was you had to put two trees in there because you had to give them a choice. Right?
I mean, that's sort of the ultimate form of love that I've heard. Like, at least, I think it was an Orthodox, excuse me, like I guess, I don't know, Brooke, are they priests? Orthodox?
Yeah, you could say priests.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're
said-
Orthodox theologians as well.
But they'd said, God loved us so much that he gave us the free will to hate him. I like that, and that's a pretty interesting way of looking at it. Like when I explain it to people, is like God loved you so much that you have every not even like right. It's not a right, but it's like you have every ability and to just hate him, and he still loves you anyways. You know, the most hateful person in the world is loved just as much as the most God-fearing, God-loving person in the world. There's really no difference because it's that free will allowing us to live however we want. I just had this conversation with someone about that and just explaining to them, like, at least kind of how Brooke and I have talked about it, like explaining the love of God, the acceptance and stuff like that, the almost universalism of it. But yeah, like that was even though he could have just like not given them that choice, and the only choice Adam and Eve would have ever had to make was what fruit to eat that day.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they really would do, is just eat fruit. And be fruitful and multiply. That's all they were really going to do for all of time. Like the Garden of Eden was going to just inevitably expand. Adam and Eve were going to have tons of kids. And then, of course, all those kids would have kids and kids and more kids. And then that's that. Like there would be no real consideration. But he gives them this choice from the get-go to say, hey, do you want to follow literally the one rule that I'm going to give you? Because that's a pretty simple rule. It wasn't even to like, I guess in terms of the sin, it was just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like you have to do this or have to do that, because a lot of the law even is not just what you can't do, but also what you must do. And I think it's easier to just not do something. Versus
how hard is it not to kill? You know, like how hard is it not to murder? You know, are you
and
like
literally
fighting the
all it
urge
was,
right now?
Yeah, and all it was, hey, you see that tree there? Yeah, don't touch that. Well, not even don't touch, just don't eat it. They probably could have walked right up to it, touched it, looked at it, go, oh, so they aren't apples or whatever. But
True.
that's all it was. And they just went ahead and, you know, it's all the woman's fault.
Mostly.
It's this woman you gave me, God. Yeah, maybe that's where the female nature came from.
Adam
Not
didn't
just
keep the frame, you know. That's
Adam didn't keep the frame, and he got the blame anyway. So he had the authority, and you know, he took the hit.
that's where female nature came from. Not just the partaking of the fruit, but also Adam's excuse.
yeah.
But yeah, like just from right off the bat, he gives them just literally one choice. Because even if we didn't have that choice, we would have just, I think it kind of like shows how far he was willing to go to just allow mankind to be free to live their own life. Because like if there was like a
a good one.
Where do you want to go to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Well, I don't know. You choose.
How about that tree?
How about that tree? But if you really think about it, though, like if there was like an alternate universe, like let's just say hypothetically, for the sake of this, like that like the Garden of Eden in an alternate universe played out differently, where God never offered the choice.
Mhm.
Like in a sense, and if we looked at it, I think we would conclude like, well, like that is actually sort of a shade short of complete and total love that God has to offer, because he doesn't love us enough to give us that choice. Whereas now we look back at it and go, look, he had everything was going so well, but he still had the love and the, I don't know if it's courage, but God made a decision to be like, okay, I love you this much that I'm going to give you the ability to go against me.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the, love you enough to let you go if you choose so. Like if you really want to make that decision, even though it might not be the best. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It,
Very facts.
he loved, he loved us enough to let us go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think that tangles into my last interpretation of the two trees, which is my favorite to talk about, because we get to talk about he didn't talk about it literally, but it's very in parallel with good old Uncle Ted. So where it talks about, what about consciousness? Were we conscious before the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Is there?
Yeah.
Who's asking this question?
I am right now.
Yeah.
Say it again.
It's Christian Ted pillars, right? This kind of gets thrown around a bit from what I've seen, but it's hard to find that community. It's very niche. But but if we do not have the knowledge of good and evil, and we're only eating from the tree of life, and we have no ignorance of all that, are we even conscious beings at that point?
So wait, state it again one more time. I was somewhat distracted.
Okay, if we didn't eat from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, so we had no knowledge of good and evil, and we're only eating from the tree of life, and we are unaware of all of those things, are we even conscious human beings at that point? Was that the beginning of human consciousness?
So you got to be clear on that. I would say we were conscious,
yeah,
but we weren't necessarily sentient.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because consciousness is only a condition of sentience, and sentience would require like a level of awareness and sort of self-determination. So having not experienced a real choice like that.
Yeah, it's tricky.
It's a tough one.
You get what I'm getting at, right?
I do get what you're getting at, but there's a problem with that in the sense that Adam had a choice in naming the animals. So it's not like humanity had no choice prior to the actions of the tree. What makes it unique in that choice is that it was the first time they were deceived. They were subject to deception, and that is what they had no knowledge of. They did not know of deception and lying. So consciousness, I would have to say that they did, because we see the actions of Adam before. We see him recognizing Eve as being, self-aware enough to say, look, this is part of my body, flesh of my flesh, and stuff like that. But I do think probably, I don't know if sentience, there was definitely an
part of humanity fell.
Part of humanity fell. I'm not sure.
So let's say, they have their kids and those kids have kids, but only like certain branches of the family partake of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil.
I mean, there's not a lot to support that. I get
You know.
I get the
If
idea was
Kane's branch of the family decided to partake.
yeah, and I mean the fall was gradual, right? You know, it said that, you know, God said, in the day that you eat of this fruit, you will surely die. Obviously, they didn't die in the day of which they ate it, but we started to see the implications of death come into the human race, and they started to live shorter and shorter lives. And obviously there was decay and other things, you know, and other things in the human condition. So maybe in that respect, but God wanted, you know, this is the crux of the cross, right? This is the culmination of the crucifixion of Christ. What is the greatest sin that humanity can perform? That is the act of the creation killing the creator, right? And in so doing, you have committed the ultimate blasphemy. That is the purest expression of sin and rebellion that humanity could possibly perform, and we did it. And through the actions of the cross, God revealed, even at our worst, he still loved us, and he gave us his son. So even when we were the enemies and we hated him and rejected him and we killed him and we did the worst possible thing imaginable, his nature is revealed, and he shows that he loves us and he's forgiven us. So
would Jesus have come if mankind didn't fall?
Yes, he would have come to take us up to the Father. He would have come not to die, but he would have come to take us home.
Yeah, there's no sins to pay for.
It would be no sins. He would have come. He would become a man, and then he would have.
That would be like that'd be the most chill thing ever. Just, hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, we're just heading out.
Yeah, I'm your creator. Okay, let's go home. You know, but to answer the question about as for the sentience and the consciousness thing, I don't think if I understand what the consciousness is, I think we did have the spark of the divine mind. I think we did have probably a greater tuition to the consciousness of God. So I don't think we were ever not conscious. I think what awoken was the conscience, you know, that TikTok of right and wrong. I think that's kind of what we got. I could be wrong. That's a good question though.
Yeah.
TikTok.
The great
now,
evil. Yeah.
Now all of China knows we're here.
Taking away all of our youngsters. You know?
What about you, Kong? What do you think? You think we were conscious, unconscious?
I
Is
don't
it
know.
all a dream? Are we in the Matrix?
I think it's a good question to ask that not a lot of people seem to ask, right? I don't know. I'm on both sides of the fence here. That's why I like talking about it, because I can see both points. It's hard to start because there's so much background info that you have to know to get into the question. So I'm trying to find a way to
It's like, what is consciousness? We don't even know what consciousness really is.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
so that's problem one. Yeah, we know we have it. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. It's the whole brain naming itself problem, right?
Yeah. Using a human brain to, you know, explain a human brain, right?
Yeah. And so it's tricky. There's so much background info you got to put into it. So I'm trying to be selective to make the case of how much I need to, you know.
Maybe we're just like a basic AI when God created us, and then
we got an upgrade.
By committing that sin, we basically, like, you know, got some I don't know, malware. I don't know if you know what the
new code. Yeah, malware is probably a good virus. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we basically we
consciousness wrong.
Yeah.
You know, we plugged the cable in the wrong spot, and then oops. Guess we got this new malware, and God's like, yep, and because of this, here's how your coding's all screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and so
and Jesus came with
as the antivirus
with the 2.0 system update.
He was the McAfee.
He told us about crypto and fixed our computers, you know.
Crypto Jesus, man.
But yeah,
what's the thing?
One of the underlying questions about is the eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil make us conscious? Is consciousness a bad thing? Right? Because is that what leads to suffering? To go back to, you know, peanuts and is consciousness and that knowledge of good and evil a bad thing? So not necessarily the tree, but if God gave us a warning, don't do this, or a bunch of bad stuff happens, and we do it, is the knowledge of good and evil inherently bad then? for
Well,
you.
that's why I'm using the proper words like conscience. Like we were conscious the whole time. I'd say it's just whether or not we were sentient, like having the ability, being self-determined. So we could think all we want, but to what level of self-determination did we really have? How much decisions could we really do? So to just always be in the blissful presence of God in the Garden of Eden, yeah, we're thinking, yes, we're making decisions, but to what level? Like God basically is basically it's a test run. Okay, here's a choice. And the one choice is to basically just continue on living. Just don't touch the thing. Or the other one is touch the thing, eat it, and completely go against the one thing that he told us not to. Like, I think that's like a true test of free will and turns us from not just conscious participants in sort of creation to now free will entities. Now we have the free will to both completely love and devote our lives to God and completely hate and despise and blaspheme God at the same time. God would rather us have the full free will of loving him rather than just have him and nothing else and never know the difference. Like, he didn't want darkness, but he understood that we would choose the darkness to then come back to choose him because it'd be that much better.
Prodigal son kind of story.
Yeah, like he would rather us have the appreciation that the prodigal son had of the love, because like that's just how like our free will would understand it, versus the son that was always there, that never left.
Kind of like you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah, and there's definitely a deeper appreciation. Now, did he want us to suffer? Did he want Adam and Eve to choose the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? No. But he also understood that like we kind of needed that for our own good to sort of know the difference, like make that decision.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want the struggle, but he understood the struggle helped.
Could serve a purpose. He can use it.
Yeah, it serves a purpose. So it's setting up the stage, the fall of man leading to now the redemption through Christ. Like it's showing like, okay, here's an entire part of showing you why like law and good and evil and all this stuff that like this is what this led to, and here's how it can be better. And we still struggle with that too. Like even though the truth is evident and God's grace is there, like we're still struggling with like the good and evil part.
Yeah, good take.
Yeah. So I think I found a way to maybe explain like the underlying principles here. When you talk about evolutionary theory and fitness of a species, if you have full knowledge, you'll actually die faster, if that makes sense. Natural selection picks for specific traits, but not all traits, because all traits is too high maintenance and you won't survive. Right? I'm trying to find the best way to explain that. There's a lot of books written on this, right?
Yeah. If you have all knowledge, say it again. If you have all knowledge,
yeah. If your biological traits are mostly knowledge and information gathering, you will die, because there's so many animals and competition out there that don't have all knowledge, but they got a lot of weapons.
Right, the physical advantage. Okay.
Yeah. That's why the smart kid that always pushes up his glasses gets beat up by the school bully, right?
Right. Okay. I get what you're saying.
Knowledge over actual survival, right?
Yes.
And each thing we have in our brains, like dogs can see and smell and hear way better than us. They're a lot better about gathering information, but they have to take cuts elsewhere, right? Like not having opposable limbs or have prefrontal cortex of the brain, things like that. So most of survival and fitness traits are trade-offs. And if you trade off all of your survival capabilities for knowledge, you are going to doom yourself, right? You just doomed your species, because all the other people are way more efficient at those few traits they have instead of trying to gather all traits.
Right.
And also, we talked about this before, I think a while ago. the bigger your brain is, the more you have to eat for it, right?
Yes.
But if you don't have the tools to eat and you just have a big brain, you die also.
Or you get short and start losing your teeth. Yes. Yeah. When we became agriculture, we got shorter. So, and we lost our Neanderthal brains.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what that's tithing at. So we talked about at the beginning, life and knowledge aren't necessarily opposites, but in this, it kind of is.
It can be. Yeah.
In this lens, right? That the life and knowledge are opposites. So before we were eating from the tree of life, we were happy, we were doing this, and this is all using it as super allegory metaphor, right?
Mhm.
Obviously not literal if we're talking about evolutionary theory in millions of years. But a lot of these people are talking about this could be the ape to human transition, right? Where we gain consciousness for the first time, and it's actually done more harm than good. And should we push a button and go back to ape? The return to monkey meme, right? And but it's the genuine philosophical conversation of that meme, right?
Right.
And so that's what I was talking about. We're talking about the sentience and consciousness of it. We don't know if other animals have it. We could usually assume by behavioral patterns and study that they probably don't, right? Like, if you look at a dog or a monkey or things like that, they don't have those types of brain power, and they also don't have those behaviors associated with us constantly dooming ourselves in our mind, right? Because when you have sentience and consciousness, your brain, I think it's like 47% of the time, your mind is racing about things that aren't happening right now, which doesn't apply to other animals.
We think.
They only think about right now. Yeah.
Yeah, we think.
So this is the big question, right? And this is my favorite thing to talk about all the time, because to me it has huge ramifications for everything, right? And if you look into a lot of like this is why I think it's interesting, because we're having an intersection between science and like weird hippie mindfulness meditation stuff, right? Because both of them are studying consciousness now, and we're starting to be able to apply the scientific method to some of those hippie theories, so to speak, and trying to make new conclusions on that. So it's very interesting. Yeah, a reason, it's a blessing and a curse. That's what Brother John just put, and that's essentially what we're talking about here, right? Is that sentience and consciousness that we made that evolutionary leap a problem? Was life better when we only had the tree of life and we only were in the normal life cycle of
it probably would have been better, but that appreciation and sort of devotion that we are capable of was subpar. Like, if all you ever know is bliss and good, you don't have really, like, you don't know what you have really. But when you have the experience to actually choose make bad decisions, like if we were just eating the fruit, we're partaking in the fruit that is all around us in the Garden of Eden, because that's all that's ever provided. We never really know what it's like to be hungry. Like, we feel like, I bet Adam and Eve just felt a little peckish. Just ate some food now. Yeah, they would just eat. No, just,
what do you want to eat today? I don't know. What do you want to eat?
Like, you want to eat now? Like, they wouldn't know hungry. They would just, I'm just gonna have a little more to eat, and I'm gonna eat this. I'm gonna partake of that. Oh, let's try that. That's good. But now they actually have to work. Now there's the sweat on their brow. There's labor. Like, what is it? Eve had to actually experience pain to give childbirth. Now she can really appreciate what's happening. She's giving birth to a new life. There's labor involved. Now there's the value that can be added to it. Not that you wouldn't value a child that was born before the fall, but it would just be that it'd be a whole different thing. Like, it's not that, like, again, it's not the works thing. It's not God wanted us to work for that, but we could appreciate it through the work. There's a different kind of appreciation, I think, too. Like, he doesn't want you to, like, try to, like, it's not a works-based thing. It's kind of just like a works let you know what you're missing out on, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we do got I sent out the join link, and we've already got a pile up of people, so this will be interesting.
Let's do it.
We've already got 2 or 3 in the back, so we'll start with our one missing Lord of the Rings character, Tom Bombadil.
Yeah!
All right. Don't do anything crazy, Tom.
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
It's good to see you, Tom.
I don't know. I say like one thing and then I leave, right?
Yeah. No, like
we got a bit of a backup. So
I'm
echoing.
yeah.
Well, I love you, Conk, Brooke, and Amos, and I'm gonna have sex with my cleaning lady today.
Okay. Go for it.
Bye.
Make sure she cleans first.
Make sure
Me
and
and my cock.
get enthusiastic consent. Make sure you get enthusiastic consent.
Okay.
All right.
For fuck's sake.
So,
Tom, what the hell's going on with you, bro?
all right, we've got not a bot Heather. She's still lying to me, trying to convince me that she's not a bot, and I can see through those.
Welcome, Heather. Good to have you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, coming through
Okay.
clear.
I had an actual, succinct, semi-intelligent comment that would have tied in with something that Amos said, which I'm obviously going to have to re-listen to get it. But after Tom's
Expression.
exclamation
Very
of his plans for the day, it all just went away.
Yeah, that seems to be a common theme.
It's like I had this little bit of something semi-intelligent to say on the program. This little seed, and Tom blew it out of the water.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I'm
well.
sure we can get it
As
back.
you do.
Hey, Amos, can you recall everything you've said in the last
Yeah,
hour?
no, please.
Let's start over. We'll start the show again.
Everyone, let's go 39. Amos, take it.
This is just so lovely. As usual, I just wanted to call in to say thank you. I'm enjoying the differences, the different concepts. Conk had mentioned something earlier about, not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with any of the things, just like liking the exchange of ideas. I like that it feels like I'm getting like a mental like
Software
I shouldn't
upgrade.
yeah, like a reboot, like it triggers me to like, it helps me. It's nice to be able to think and just about anything outside of myself, anything outside of all the little stuff you have going on, just that intellectual pursuit of knowledge. And I just really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Heather, I got a quick question for you. That's all fine with that. We're talking about, gaining the knowledge and the intellectual thing is a good thing, and it's reliving. How do you feel about the phrase "ignorance is bliss"?
I do actually, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes to be ignorant of things or to ignore what's going on around you can be a protective like barrier. Kind of like, when someone uses an addiction to be able to get through something hard. Like if your childhood was hard and, you go into addiction and somehow, it's not a healthy way to do it, but it gets you through to the other side somehow. This is probably, I'm not saying it right, but
yeah, that's literally my job, so I know exactly.
I know it's your job, and it's like, I'm sure you could say it much more succinctly than I, but I just like whatever gets you through. And sometimes that ignorance gets you through it until you're able to actually accept and handle it. Like there's things that, I keep working on my own self-growth and everything, and you go through all that, and it's like there's stuff that comes up now that I'm like, holy crap, why am I still holding on to that resentment from when I was in 6th grade? Like, where did that come from? But the deeper you go, the deeper you go. And you got to get through the one thing to get to the next. And, my mom lives in her ignorance is bliss kind of thing, ignoring stuff all the time. And she's perfectly happy to do that. Anyone who has to deal with it might find it a bit more difficult to handle. But I mean, that's what she has to do to get through. And so then the only thing that would be on to me would be to accept that that's where she's at, and not everybody's at the same place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I like knowledge. I like learning new things. I like being able to stretch my brain a bit. When I used to substitute teach, some of the kids would ask questions, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, you're bending my brain a little bit. Give me a moment, because I need to actually think it out to be able to respond properly. And, you know, when you substitute, you're just like popping, you know what I mean? You don't always even get to see a lesson plan as you're walking into the room, and depending on what's going on. So it's like, it was a nice mental exercise while I did that. But you know, everybody's got to approach things their own way. But now it's bugging me that I cannot recall my comment as to tying into what Amos said, because you know, I've crossed over 50 now.
Ooh.
So I crossed over 50.
Congrats.
So it's like, thank you. So now I'm feeling like, you know, I maybe need to exercise my brain more to keep on top of things, you know? So anyway, I will let you go. Thank you so much.
But Heather, very quickly, if you do remember the comment, just leave a comment below and we'll respond. So you know you're always welcome.
I'd probably have to do it on the re-listen. And
Yeah, that's fine.
put it in there.
It's all good.
Awesome.
Take care, guys. Have a
Thanks
great
for
week.
coming, Heather.
Have a good one, Heather. Well, look at that.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, but yeah. What do you guys feel about that? Because I threw it at Heather, but I don't think I threw it at you guys. What do you guys feel about that phrase "ignorance is bliss"? Because it kind of alludes to what we were just talking about before.
What do you say, Amos?
That's pre-fall, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because they're completely ignorant to the knowledge of good and evil,
Yeah.
which
So
is kind
ignorance
of
is bliss.
Yeah. Now, what is the flip?
But
side?
that's ultimate ignorance almost.
Mhm.
That's sort of the ultimate ignorance of not knowing sort of the world as like, because God had the knowledge of good and evil. We didn't. We just because
Mhm.
like in a way the serpent or whatever was like, you know, talking about being like God. In a way, having the knowledge of good and evil was us kind of trying to be like God. Like, oh, now we know. He played it up like no, you're gonna know stuff, and it's like all it wasn't really like we knew more. It was just it drew a line in our mind between good and evil.
Correct.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like we knew more. It was we would know different.
Yep. Bull Rush, friend of the
Um,
show. He was. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but he brought up something.
Well, that's not. But that's not to Bull Rush's point. We're not talking about being. We're not condoning ignorance. We're just talking about the biblical context. Ignorance before the fall was before the knowledge of good and evil. That's all that really is. Of course, ignorance doesn't rescue you from consequences. The
I think Bull Rush is going into. I think Bull Rush is going into the whole thing like it doesn't matter if you saw the speed limit sign or not, right? You can still going to get a ticket if you break it, right?
Yeah, or if
This
you
is the
sleep with
thing.
your
But this is the thing, though. We didn't have speed limits before the fall.
Mm-hmm.
There was a speed limit. It was just live your life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Name
get.
animals, partake of the fruit. That's it.
Yeah, I think Bull Rush has sound
sex.
advice for the current circumstance we're in.
Oh yeah.
It's its own little thing, right? Yeah. Or giant thing. I don't know if you should call that its own little thing. Is that derogatory? We'll find out. But I mean, ignorance is bliss. A lot of people can see that, right? But what is the flip side of that coin? Is it that knowledge is suffering?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways it can be, and we've seen that as a result of coming out of the biblical story. There's been tremendous human suffering as a result of us choosing, but at the same time we've seen tremendous human progression. the building of civilizations, going to other planets, and just advancements and so forth as we wrestle against kind of the futility of life. So I mean, there is a trade-off, but a lot of very high-level thinking academics and other people will say that, yeah, if you're very intelligent and you look at life, and you will conclude that it's pretty much pointless, and what's the point of living?
Yeah, there's a
Right,
level of suffering that comes from knowing things, because even just social awareness, awareness of just life around you, because you're thinking to yourself, like, what is the real influence of your actions? What are the influence of other people's actions? What is going on around the world? People on the knowledge that there are people that exist in the world that have good intentions, good beliefs, good ideas, and life doesn't really care about that. Like, the world doesn't care about that. It just a guy doing all the right things, making all the right decisions, being an awesome person in his community and with people around him, can just die. And doesn't say anything about God or people or anything. It's just life.
Yeah.
Like, life can be cruel in that way. And it's not like a person or a thing. It's just sort of the forces around us. I think before the fall, that probably really wasn't even a concern, if at all. Like, if Adam and Eve, took a tumble, well, it's not to say everything was perfect before the fall, but if they took a tumble, I feel like they would just like the earth would almost be like a pillow. It's just, that's kind of how it seems. It's like this was the sort of the ultimate decision when they partook of the fruit. It's knowing that difference. Now there's pain. Now there's suffering. Everything is work.
From the curse of knowledge. From
the curse. But it wasn't like more knowledge. It was just difference of knowledge. And I think that's a big thing, because really, how much more do you really know when you start to understand suffering in the world? You're not really knowing much more. You kind of just parse and can understand what's going on. Like, we know there are third world countries. A lot of people just decide to be ignorant about it. But once we know that and we sort of acknowledge that, we realize, there's suffering in the world.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, one of the tricky parts of this, and Brother John just brought it up over there a second ago. What about the knowledge they had before? Yeah, did they have the minds of the infant? That was the thing that stuck out to me. So he said, how could Adam and Eve make an educated decision about picking from the tree if they had no knowledge? Did they have minds of an infant?
It wasn't an educated decision. I think the
clearly
simple
wasn't.
fact is
They were influenced by the snake car salesman. Yeah,
I think it's not education or how much knowledge. I think it's the decision that's the difference.
The choice, yeah.
That's all it is. Because you can, like, a computer has knowledge, but it can't make a decision.
Yeah.
The difference between us and being automatons was the decision.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I mean, to be super, I guess, literal, robots do make decisions all the time. Otherwise, how can they beat us at chess? They got to make decisions.
But but I think in terms of, like, you get what I'm saying, like algorithms and such, like running a program. Like, Adam and Eve were making decisions. They were naming animals and they were choosing what to eat, and just probably, and then of course every now and then well, I don't even know about that. Someone made a joke. I remember there was like this comment, it's a sort of parody skit about Adam and Eve. Like, Adam didn't know what it meant to be horny and want to have sex because he didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. He just kind of like,
I don't know if that one flies.
I'm not sure if that works.
it was something like, just he didn't really, like, I don't know exactly how that would work either. But
I mean, he couldn't pick his belly button.
Yeah.
Didn't even have one.
Yeah, in theory,
But
he didn't have a belly button.
Yeah, I mean, their decisions were very limited with what they would do, but then God gives them this one decision that's completely out of the ordinary. Hey, don't touch that thing. And I think it wasn't like, I think if God never said anything, Do you think they would have partook of the fruit?
Probably.
Probably.
I mean, it doesn't say it looks any more special or different than other trees. They probably would have just ate from it on an accident.
What if the tree and the fruit really was nothing? It was just a tree with fruit.
No, it doesn't have to actually be anything.
Mhm.
It could just be spiritual consequences for the choice to disobey.
Yeah, because the good and evil is just a distinction. So all God did with that tree was separate it.
Yes.
Don't
So it
touch
doesn't-
this one.
it
Because he
doesn't
could have just
actually-
point. Yeah, he just
Yeah.
don't touch this one. For all they
And it's
know,
never-
it was just an apple. Really, it was probably really just an apple tree that was in an apple orchard that he made.
And so you're saying God just designated, don't do that one just because. And see
Yeah.
what
And
happens.
it was the disobedience in and of itself that kind of
And it-
brought
yeah.
the awakening. Like, oh wow,
Like,
that's a theory. That is a
neurons.
theory.
That's the neurons that just fired because we went beyond the initial sort of software package of what decisions we make of just eating, fucking, and naming animals.
Kind of life I need, you know?
I mean, it's
So-
important to note that we did not partake of the tree of life, right? We actually did not. So that's why we were kicked out. In the narrative, we were kicked out of the garden, and we were forbidden to partake of the tree of life because it would have sealed man in that condition. We partake of it now through Christ. Christ is the tree of life. We see a revealing of that in the book of Revelations and stuff like that. So we partake of that now. It's spiritual. We're drawing from the life of Christ. So there is a possibility, because we don't actually know, the narrative, how long the time frame is. They missed one tree. They may have actually missed both of them if there was no real significance. I think Conk is right. Probably they would have eaten it eventually, but there is a chance they could have missed it. So you never know.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a very fun theory.
It's a good discussion. It's a good
Yeah.
discussion.
I can talk about it for another hour, but we should probably wrap it up. I think we had a good ending point. Do we want to do final thoughts, Avis? If you have said final thoughts, please partake and share.
I'll answer. You see Boris just dropped another comment.
Oh yeah.
The forbidden fruit represents our innate need to test and overcome our limitations. I think that came after the fall.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because we didn't believe in. I think the fall brought about the idea of limitations too.
Yeah. Actually,
There's
yeah,
all-
I would say limitations are God thinks is relatively a good thing, right? I think there's
Because
more.
we didn't consider that. We would just go about our day. Like
Yeah, just are.
yeah. Whereas now we have this distinct, like the line is drawn when we partake of the fruit, that awakening of the good knowledge of good and evil. Now we have limitations because we actually have to work.
And I could be
produce-
better.
Yeah, I have to work, so that means I can work more.
Yeah.
There's pain. There could also be more pain,
Yeah.
or childbirth had pain to it. It could always be more painful. you had to work.
half.
Yeah, you had to work. You had to work to sort of produce food and fruit. So there could always be more fruit to basically grow. You could always till more land. So yeah, the need to test and overcome our limitations came afterwards. There, Bull Rush. It wasn't before.
Yeah.
It was simply a decision to rebel, and because which has good and bad.
I'll rephrase it, because they didn't actually rebel. They didn't make it a conscious, like, we're going to break it.
Yeah,
Break God. They were deceived. There's a difference.
and that's another thing. Then Bull Rush. You gotta rewatch what we talked about before, because we kind of went into all this. God created humans to have a limited capacity, but he gave them a decision that if they made a decision, that would awaken us to what we're awakened to now, which is the knowledge of good and evil. That's what turned us from, what is he saying, semi-retarded to now we have the disparity between, like,
Well, I
very
mean, we all
intelligent.
still are, if we're going to be honest.
Oh yeah,
We
no
haven't changed
doubt
that
about
much.
that. We haven't changed in that.
I think
way,
it's
but
almost
like,
worse.
This is Wall
Yeah,
Street bets.
it was capacity. No, but it's capacity. It's that capacity. We only had the capacity for very basic things before the fall. After the fall, that capacity to decide. It's not a capacity for knowledge. It's just a capacity to decide.
Yeah.
Now we can decide to be shit person. We could decide to be a good person. We could decide to follow what we're, do as we're told or not do as we're told. All that. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Awesome. All right, Brooke, what do you got?
Final thought, I think it was a good discussion. Definitely raised some interesting points. I'll add to that there are other creation narrative stories, but all involving a garden, right? Like from our last show, I actually went and looked at the Egyptian, the Egyptian creation story and the rise of Ben, and he, popped forth Ra, and we were created from the tears of Ra when his children returned from a fishing trip and stuff. But I mean, yeah, the ancient world understood that the garden was kind of the cradle of creation, not just in Christianity and otherwise. So of course, there are going to be multiple interpretations. There are going to be multiple takes on it. A lot of people could focus on a lot of the details. You could get lost in the garden, right? You could get lost in the garden narrative. And I think all of that's healthy. But I do think we have to bring it around. Like, even if you don't believe in the garden narrative, you do bring it back to Christ. You do bring it back to the work of Christ. But I feel like you can't really understand that in full context without examining the garden narrative, which I think is very important. And I think I just want to plug really quickly. A friend of ours, missionary Paulie B, is going to have me on his show. I think this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we're going to be discussing hell. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely follow my channel and others and look up Paulie B. And
Hell yeah.
We'll get into it for about an hour or so. So that will also tie into the garden later on. So that's kind of my final thoughts.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, I'd say my final thoughts, and not to throw a whole new topic in, but just to just to throw it in there. Amos was talking about capacity, and I think the word I would use is complexity, right? And in general, I think if you just look at patterns of things, complexity usually is bad. From a general feel of things, the more simple you can make something and the more efficient you can make something, the better it does overall. The more you add complexity into your life and your thoughts, usually also the more miserable you are. Right?
Huh.
So that's just something I would take on it. And so I think the Garden of Eden is like the ultimate in non-complexity. They had one rule and they had free reign of everything else, right? It's hard to make it more simple than that.
What if the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil was just mushrooms?
Good times.
Mushroom alien beings.
Oh no, good and evil. Well,
start taking mushrooms and start people.
I am naked. What?
You're all demons. They're trying to get me.
Maybe that's what it was. Really, was just you see
Dude,
these
is that
mushrooms.
snake
Don't
talking,
eat them.
bro? Dude, is that...
The trees talk to you when you're on mushrooms. Yeah, that's a real thing.
That was the bush.
Yeah, maybe that was the burning bush.
What would the tree say? Stop eating my cousin? I don't know.
There's a good story by Bobby's Perspective where he got really high on mushrooms. He's like an Orthodox Christian now. And the tree basically commented like, well, look at you humans. You're always trying to be something something more. Look at me, I'm a tree. And I'll always be a tree. I've been a tree for hundreds of years. Why can't you be content?
Until I make you a picnic table tree. Come on. Come at me, bro. What's up? Catch these
funny.
hands. Oh, you don't have any. Thumbs, bro. Thumbs.
We got one up on you.
About who's cooler. King Kong versus Godzilla debate, but trees. All right. I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, next week, are we going to be on Brooks' channel?
Yes, we're on my channel. Links below. And of course, follow the playlist. I'll add it once I set it up.
Yep. Awesome possum. Well, salute.